The Maryland governor's race is shaping up to be a familiar one. Governor Wes Moore and Republican Dan Cox are set for a rematch after both secured their party's nominations. Joining us this morning is Maryland delegate Joe Vogel, a surrogate for the Moore campaign, to discuss the governor's re-election bid and really the issues that could decide this race. Late night for you, but good morning and thank you for joining us.
Morning, Simone. It's good to be here.
Yeah, Governor Moore, we saw secure the Democratic nomination. He did it quickly, too, less than 20 minutes after polls closed. What message do you think that sent to Maryland voters in this primary?
An overwhelming victory last night for the governor, but also for his allies across the state. We saw county executives and candidates for Congress and candidates up and down the ballot who have stood with this governor and working to make life more affordable for Maryland families. And they all saw big wins last night. And I'm confident that the governor will be reelected this November.
You know, I'm curious, as we look back at his first term, what accomplishments do you believe have had the biggest impact on Maryland families? You know, as often we see with politics, we've seen some, variation in the polling with his approval rating. So as you reflect on the term, what would you say, again, has had the biggest impact for Maryland families?
Well, I think the approval rating that I'm looking towards is the election this November, when he will overwhelmingly defeat Dan Cox again and send a clear message that this agenda that the governor has put forward, the agenda that we've worked with as a legislator, I've collaborated with the governor on to make life more affordable for Maryland families, to create new businesses, 55,000 new businesses in our state during his term in office. To build more housing. The governor has been laser focused on building more housing here in our state to make housing more affordable so young families can afford to buy a house and so renters can continue living in their homes in the state of Maryland. And look, we have to understand the moment that we're in right now. We have a federal government, a Trump administration that has a bullseye on the state of Maryland. And the actions that the federal government are taking, whether it be the war in Iran or tariffs, are making life more affordable for Maryland families. Are making life more expensive for Maryland families, I should say. And the governor and the legislature here continue to be laser focused on putting up a wall against those attacks on our state and making life more affordable for the families of our state. And you look at the Republican nominee for Governor Dan Cox, he would be a rubber stamp for Donald Trump and help Donald Trump in his efforts to hurt our state. Maryland just can't afford that.
Well, I completely understand where you're coming from in terms of, also how democratic Maryland, right, is, right? Like the context. Governor Wes Moore has an advantage here. But one thing I heard you talking about, was the cost of housing. We hear from voters time and time again, we can't afford basic necessities. That has not changed. And that is the atmosphere that Governor Wes Moore is going into with this general election in November. When you think about the biggest priorities Governor Moore wants to tackle if he's reelected, when you tell people we want to make things more affordable, what tangible change do you think he's going to aim for?
Well, I'll give you one example of the work that we did just this past legislative session. Around grocery prices, right? We can't control the policies of the federal government, right? And the tariffs right now are making groceries more expensive for Maryland families. What we can control, though, are the laws within our state. And the legislature passed the governor's bill to ban surveillance pricing in our state, a practice that we're seeing, a practice of corporate greed where grocery stores are using personal data on consumers to charge them more for the goods that they need. This is just one example of the many that we've taken over the last 4 years in partnership with the legislature and the governor, again, to make life more affordable for Marylanders. As we're building more housing, we're making housing more affordable for Marylanders. We've taken a number of steps to make healthcare more affordable for Marylanders. Again, we're doing everything we can at this moment in time to improve the conditions of Marylanders' lives and reduce costs. But look, Marylanders are hurting right now, and they're hurting because of the actions of this federal government and this Trump administration.
So we heard you talk about, the race coming up in the general election. We've got this rematch against Dan Cox, deja vu, so to speak. Yeah. I want to talk about how your campaign views the contrast really between the two candidates. But one thing we know is that in politics, you never rest on your laurels, right? It's a different set of circumstances. It's a different election. How are you all going to stand out just as we put a bow on this conversation?
So let me start by making it very clear. we are going to defeat Dan Cox in November and reelect Governor Westmore. Dan Cox has been rejected by Marylanders over and over and over again because his agenda is just too extreme for the state of Maryland. We saw it on January 6th when he chartered buses to take Marylanders to the January 6th insurrection. We've seen it with his repeated attempts to criminalize abortion in the state of Maryland. He was one of the most extreme state legislators, and Marylanders see that and understand that. But we're going to work as hard as we can. The governor, I was with him yesterday. I saw the energy on the ground for our governor, the support for his agenda. And I'm just excited for the months ahead to draw that contrast. And again in November when we celebrate his victory.
Well, in a largely Democratic state, he certainly has the resounding support of the party firmly backing him at this point in time. Maryland Delegate Joe Vogel joining me this morning. Appreciate the conversation. Thank you.